So I'm off camera. I'm Bill Buxton, and it is the 7th of December 2005, and I am sitting here in Toronto, and I'm speaking with Qader Saeed. And so let's just start right in with some questions, okay?
Okay.
So for the first thing is, you were the liaison officer in the 1957 Austrian Karakoram expedition.
That's true.
And it made the first descent of Broad Peak. Can you tell me what is a liaison officer?
A liaison officer is generally from the armed forces, and whenever there is a foreign expedition coming to Pakistan to scale a particular peak, they have to send one representative from Pakistan side to help them out in their problems. They could have language problems, like even if they speak English, English is not the language in Pakistan, and therefore this liaison officer is supposed to help them out more as an interpreter. Plus, the most important point is the security problem, and that is that in order to ensure that all these foreigners who come to Pakistan with an aim as a requirement, like Broad Peak was the aim of Austrian Karakoram expedition, well, that's it. They should not be going here and there in different areas because it touches the border of our neighboring countries, and therefore the armed forces officer is supposed to be with them, guiding them and helping them out in all their problems. Not only with the porters, but also with the government side people like the political agent, political resident, etc., etc.
So
Okay.
how did you get the job?
Yeah, it so happened that I only had about 3 years of regimental soldiering by then. I was commissioned in 1954, and this was 1957.
You were a captain at the time?
I was a captain, a very junior captain. I was just promoted at that time. And a signal arrived from the army headquarters to my unit where I was serving, to my commanding officer, asking him if Qader Saeed would volunteer to go as a liaison officer with the Austrian Karakoram expedition, because we have from our side selected him.
So what had you been doing before? Had it anything to do with mountains or expeditions?
You see, before they select a liaison officer, they do look into your physical fitness and if you have done any particular courses in that direction, which I had not, except for my military academy, where of course I had a lot of physical endurance and I did very well there. And this was all on my reports. So they see your reports, they see your performance, and based on that they detail you. Even if you, at that time, 1957, Pakistan was only 10 years old, there was no question of any mountaineering experience at that time.
Right, and so how old were you?
I was 24 only, 24 years.
Yeah, so you were about the same age as, you were younger than most of the climbers then, right?
I was.
Yeah.
I was, yes.
And was this the only time you acted as a liaison officer?
That was the only time I acted as a liaison officer to a mountaineering expedition, yes.
Did you regret that? Did you want to do it again?
If I was young, perhaps yes, I would. But then I got so involved in my own profession that there was no question of going on a mountain again, and I did not. But I certainly regretted that later on, because I liked that particular experience. It was a remarkable experience, and I enjoyed it.
How long were you on the mountain?
About 5 months.
5 months?
Yes.
So, perhaps the most famous climber on this expedition was Hermann Buhl. And can you tell me a bit about your relationship with Hermann Buhl? Because you'd never heard of him before.
No, I did not.
But when he came, did you know how important he
Yeah.
was or how famous?
Yes. When we were in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, waiting for our flight to Skil Brum, I was presented with Nanga Parbat Pilgrimage by Hermann Buhl. And this was in English. So since I had a lot of time in the hotel where we were staying, I went through his book and I was really impressed with his achievement as a professional mountaineer. But there was one thing that did bother me after reading that book, and that was Hermann Buhl's problems on the administration side. I thought that he was a poor administrator, and I also thought that we may have some problems on the mountain because administration is exceptionally important. And if you are not leaning towards that, despite being a mountaineer, there could be problems. Take, for example, even Wintersteller, who had nothing to do with administration. Probably he never did a course in that direction. Markus Schmuck never did a course in that direction. But they were both. They had some kind of a leaning towards administration and the man management. The way Wintersteller became popular with the porters, it is remarkable. I mean, I think even I was not as popular as he was.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, they were not only good climbers, they were also good administrators. Hermann was not.
But the thing was that Markus Schmuck, for the walk-in and for the administrative part, he was the leader, so that was probably a good thing.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
He was the leader of the expedition.
Yes.
And therefore, based on his experience, I'm sure, the Austrian Alpine Club or Alpine Club, whichever club had appointed him, they appointed him as the leader of the expedition. And they knew that Hermann Buhl could have created a lot of problems, and therefore they did not accept him as the leader of the expedition.
Yeah, Hermann's specialty was a climber, not administrator.
That's true.
And yeah, but I heard a story about him helping you with some boots or something. Can you tell me what?
Yes, I think this has been given more importance than it deserves. What had happened was that my size of the boot was 46, and the Austrians, when they came with their equipment, did not have one of that size. And therefore, there was a problem. Without boots, you can't move. So Hermann Buhl and Markus Schmuck both got together, and Markus asked me if there was anybody who could make a pair of boots here. I said, look, for all I know, they might be able to do it, but within the time framework that we have, they may not be able to do it. So then they worked out time and space, and Markus Schmuck, he was responsible for all the food items. Hermann Buhl was responsible for the equipment, and Hermann Buhl had association with Sports Czech, where he had been working, and Sports Czech was the one which had provided all the equipment. So Markus suggested to Hermann Buhl that he should straight away get in touch with Sports Czech and tell them to send us a mountaineering boot of size 46. And accordingly, a telegram was sent to Sports Czech Munich, and before we got even to Ascoli, the boots arrived.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
Now, you did not speak German, correct? You speak no German?
No, not at all.
And so how was it communicating with the climbers? Obviously you must communicate in English, correct?
Yes, I did. And the government of Pakistan also knew it, the armed forces also knew it, that the language problem could only be solved if they could be somewhere in between. That is, the Germans, the Austrians knew English to some extent.
Yes.
And in that, I would say, position-wise, Diemberger was number one.
Yes.
Then came Markus Schmuck, and then Wintersteller, and surprisingly enough, Hermann Buhl, who had already been to Pakistan in 1953, was not so good in English as these three were. As far as speaking ability is concerned, I would not say that any one of them was a very good speaker, but they could express themselves to some extent, and in that, as I said, Diemberger was better than Markus Schmuck, and Markus Schmuck was better than Wintersteller, and Wintersteller was better than Hermann Buhl.
Yeah. Now, during the climb, you spent all your time in base camp, right? Or you weren't a climber, I guess is what I'm saying, correct?
No.
And so your experience on the expedition obviously is what happened when people were down in the camp and when they were speaking English too, because of course they spoke German to each other, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but there were only 5 of you in camp, correct? There was only the 4 climbers plus you.
Yes.
So of course it was a very, very small unit, so you had to communicate. You were part of the team.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, the reason I asked that is that I want to talk about what happened after they summited to the mountain. So they've reached the summit on the second attempt,
Yes.
and they're back in base camp. So I want to talk a bit about the climbs to Chogolissa and to Skil Brum. So first, after Broad Peak had been climbed, or at any time on the expedition, did Kurt Diemberger ever express to you his intention to climb Chogolissa?
No.
At any time, did Diemberger ask permission to climb Chogolissa?
No.
Did you ever give permission to Hermann Buhl or Kurt Diemberger to climb Chogolissa or any other mountain besides Broad Peak?
No.
So, if you didn't, why didn't you?
The reason for that is that all peaks which are marked on the map and named as such, you had to take out a government letter from the government of Pakistan to go on that particular peak. For instance, Broad Peak. It was known as Austrian Karakoram Expedition to Broad Peak 1957. And therefore, these 4 mountaineers were supposed to go on Broad Peak and no other named peak under any circumstances. These were the clear instructions given to me, and as you asked me about the role of the liaison officer, this was one of the role of the liaison officer to ensure that they remain confined to the orbit or to a particular peak which has been given to them for climbing.
So let's imagine for a moment that Kurt Diemberger or Hermann Buhl had asked you to go. And let's imagine even more that you wanted to give them permission. Would you have been able to, even if you wanted to, even if they asked?
If I had moved any time in that direction, it would have cost me my job, it would have cost me my future, it would have cost me many things, even to such an extent that I would have defied the government instructions and I could be even court-martialed for it.
Okay, so I think that says no matter how much you wanted to, no matter how much they asked, you were not allowed to give permission. You had not the authority.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay, so here's the difficult question that people are going to ask. Did you give permission to Fritz Wintersteller and Markus Schmuck to climb Skil Brum?
Let's say it's not Skil Brum.
Okay.
It's a peak with no name. That's very important.
Okay.
Because the name Skil Brum came after we had gone and seen the Director General of Survey Department in Murray. And that's where this name was given. And even at that time, Markus and Fritz did not know that the peak has been named Skil Brum. It was only later that they came to know that the government has approved, because the Director General could not give the name till such time that it was approved by the government. Now, the peak with no name, what had happened was that Markus came to me not only after the successful climb of Broad Peak, even before, would bring the map, spread it out in front of me and tell me, Qader, this peak, no name. You know, in his broken English, he would tell me, no name. Don't you think it should be given a name? Then I, being quite good in map reading,
Yes.
would read, study the map and find that he was right. So I said, what do you suggest? He said, can I give some information on this? I said, yes, collect as much information as you can, and then what we would do after the expedition is that we will go to Murray, see the Director General, give him all your points, and then leave it to his good judgment. So based on that, he asked me, he said, for that, I will also have to go right up to the top of the mountain. I said, go ahead, because it's an insignificant mountain. It is not named as such. It is like many peaks which are there, but since this one is quite prominent and should have been named as such, go ahead, but before you go, let me know so that we make sure that the weather conditions are all right, and then we will go from there. And I asked him, how long will it take? He said, very simple. I don't think it will take us more than 2 days from this base camp. This will be the place from where we will start and we will go. And at that time, he did not say that he and Wintersteller only wanted to do it. It was an understanding that could be all 4 of them, could be 3 of them, could be 2 of them.
Okay, so Kurt Diemberger has written the following, so I want to read it exactly, because this is a direct quote. Qader is extremely uncomfortable. He gave permission to our companions to climb the peak, but was he allowed to do that? However, this matter is not questioned in that moment. Qader adores Hermann Buhl, who has made the first ascent of the fearful Nanga Parbat, and now he sees him unhappy and deeply annoyed. This was the last thing he wanted when he good-heartedly gave the other 2 permission for their climb. How accurate is that statement?
You see, he's trying to put words into my mouth, and this is not acceptable. To start with, I never adored Hermann Buhl. Hermann Buhl, I knew him from the book that I had read, and little bit that I saw of him in that period when we were moving from Skil to Ascole and beyond that. And my own judgment about Hermann Buhl was that he would be excellent in clinging on to a peak. He had some kind of an attraction to the peak. Yeah. But so far as administration was concerned, he wasn't. So therefore, my leaning towards Hermann Buhl was very limited. And on that I'll come later when I'll talk to you about for instance, my movement to Europe later on.
Okay.
We'll come to that later because probably I will be able to tell you more. But I can tell you one thing, that between these 2 peaks, there was a lot of difference. The peak with no name, I have already described to you the reason why it was given. Chocolisa, it was next to impossible for me to give any permission, and there is no question of me being uncomfortable or anything, because there was no, this subject was never discussed.
So, important, Kurt Diemberger has also written, and this is a direct quote, but our discussion with Qader in the kitchen ended with the permission for that mountain, meaning Chocolisa. Here's what he puts in quotes for your words. They have their peak, you have yours, said Qader. Is this accurate?
You will recall that in your previous question,
yes.
I told you.
I know, I'm asking the same question twice, but because it's a direct quote, it's important to me that I ask the question from every angle to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, and that because he's saying you said these words. They have their peak, you have yours.
I couldn't agree more from your comment, the initial comment. Let me tell you, first thing is that I was never during my period of stay in base camp with just Hermann and Kurt in the kitchen. There was never an occasion when I could sit with them. Even if I peeped through the kitchen and saw those 2 sitting there, I would walk out and shout Essen gehen, which was to say that the food is ready for Markus, Schmuck and Fritz Wintersteller, and I would only go in. Reason, I had no equation with them. Although Kurt could speak better English, but I found that I was more at ease with Markus Schmuck and Fritz Wintersteller and not with Kurt Diemberger. And as far as Hermann Buhl was concerned, his language proficiency was very limited, and therefore I could not talk to him at all. So therefore, the question of being in the kitchen with these 2 gentlemen is just not on. It was never done. That's one. Number 2, I have never used those words which he's trying to put into my mouth, and I never said that they had their Skil Brum and these 2 can have Chocolisa. It is incorrect.
So, I want one more time to ask, I'm sorry for the repetition, but to ask again. Why were you able to grant permission for the unnamed mountain, which later became Skil Brum, but not Chocolisa? Why did you have the authority to say yes for this and you had no authority for the other?
Right.
Can you just, one more time?
Very good. You will recall I told you that we were to go to the survey department and meet the Director General. When we met the Director General and gave him the description of the peak with no name and gave him all the details, the Director General personally congratulated Markus Schmuck for his work, and he said, "We thank you for bringing us this information." That was about the peak with no name. Now comes Chocolisa. Chocolisa, as I told you, was a very important peak. So far, at that time in 1957, nobody had gone on that peak at all. So there is no question of Diemberger or Hermann Buhl, or for that matter Markus Schmuck or anybody else going on that peak without the prior permission from the government of Pakistan.
So that's an important question I've never asked you. If Markus Schmuck and Fritz Wintersteller had wanted to climb Chocolisa, what would your answer be?
No question. No way.
No way.
They would have never got the permission from me. They would have had to apply to the government, get the permission, and then go, which would not be on this particular expedition, maybe later.
So we have a problem, obviously, because some of what you're saying contradicts what Kurt Diemberger has written, such as the passages I quoted a moment ago. Some people might say, well, it's just his word against yours. And there's three things I want to ask you that will help me understand, or also to push on this to maybe make it so it's not just your word against Kurt's, but maybe bring the scales down on your side. So again, there's some repetition here. When you got back, tell me again the reaction of your superiors in the Pakistani government about the unclimbed mountain.
Okay. About the unclimbed mountain, I have mentioned that we went to the survey department. Director General of the survey department met us, and we gave him all the information, the photographs and all the details which Markus Schmuck had brought with him, and the attempt was appreciated and it was accepted for the reason that it was not on our map, and from then on they would move in that direction and have their peak with no name on the map with a particular name for it. And in this connection I must tell you, Markus Schmuck had a name for this peak which was not accepted.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what the name was?
I can't remember now. There was some, probably Fritz Wintersteller would be able to tell you.
Okay.
He had a particular name for it and it was not accepted, and they said no, we will like to. And why they did pick up Skil Brum, even that I don't know. Because at that time I gave no importance to these things. Now that all this has come up, I'm trying to ask myself various questions as to why this particular name was accepted and why Markus Schmuck's name was not accepted.
When you got back and this was over, what about your career? Was this was there any censor or reprimand or anything of how you managed this expedition, or were you congratulated? What was the reaction to in your career as an officer?
On my return from the expedition, I met the political agent, the political resident, and then the secretary of the frontier region area. And finally, I met the president of Pakistan, General Iskandar Mirza.
So this is not normal for a young
officer. It is not normal at all to meet all these people. And it doesn't end there. Now that you have asked me, when we landed in Rawalpindi, General Ayub, who was supposed to be the commander-in-chief of Pakistan Army, was there. And he smiled when he saw me with a long beard. And then he came to me and he said, "Well done." And he went away because he thought that I was with the expedition, and he must have read in the papers that they had scaled the peak and all that. So far as congratulations is concerned, the army doesn't believe in congratulating you or any. But the thing is that it goes into your record that you have gone and done an extracurricular activity which is related to your profession, because you are supposed to be professionally fit. And other than that, my instructions. The instructions given to me were that I was supposed to go up to base camp only, but I had gone up to Camp 1, which was against the rules and regulations, because if anything had happened to me between base camp and Camp 1, I would not have been compensated for it.
Yes.
So I did it at my own risk. So the army and the government appreciated that. Here is a youngster who's prepared to take chances and do something on his own. So I was quite pleased with my performance, and I think I was more than pleased with my interviews with the President of Pakistan and everybody else, and I thought I was all right.
So the next question then is, on your return, what was the reaction of your superiors or the Pakistani government with respect to Kurt Diemberger after he had gone to Chogalisa?
Yeah.
Because if it was an illegal peak and he went illegally, was there any consequences to that?
You know, when I came back to my regiment, I was asked to write a report on the entire expedition by the armed forces. So in my report, I mentioned about Kurt Diemberger, and I said that if there is anyone responsible for this particular attempt on Chogalisa between Hermann Buhl and Kurt Diemberger, my own analysis tell me that Kurt Diemberger is responsible for their going on Chogalisa. And if you come to think of it, I also mentioned it that if there is anyone responsible for the loss of Hermann Buhl, it is Kurt Diemberger. Because if this attempt was not made, everything would have been all right. So I mentioned it that Kurt Diemberger should not be allowed to come to Pakistan on another attempt on any peak in the Karakorams.
Now, do you know if that actually anything happened with that, or is that was your recommendation? Do you know if there were any consequences?
No, I do not know any answer to my report, because they never tell me. But I was in Canada in 1988, I think, and later on, in fact, perhaps the first time I came to know was in 1997, on the 40th anniversary of Broad Peak, that I came to know that Kurt Diemberger had already been to Pakistan for the second time, and that was in 1988 or so. Then I worked it out. I said 1957 to 1988 is almost 30 years. So 30 years, many things must have happened. The government of Pakistan probably didn't even know who that Kurt Diemberger was and who this Kurt. And in any case, when I sent the report, I'm sure they did not put it on record everywhere that if somebody with this name tries to come, they should not give permission. Okay. So that's how he managed it.
Okay. After the Austrians returned home to Europe and you returned to your regiment, did you stay in contact with any of the climbers?
Yes, I did. I was regularly in correspondence with Hermann Buhl and Fritz Wintersteller.
Hermann
I beg your pardon. What am I doing? With Markus Schmuck, and Hermann Buhl was no more there. Markus Schmuck and Fritz Wintersteller. And they didn't, as you know, I used to write in English because I did not know German. And I used to get a reply in broken English from these two gentlemen. And we became very good friends. We not only became very good friends, we became family friends. And that is when I visited Europe many times after that, and I met them, things like that.
To your knowledge, one other question. Have you ever spoken with Kurt Diemberger since 1957?
The first time I saw him was, I would not say I met him, but I saw him in 1997 on the 40th anniversary of Broad Peak, when I went there, and I was sitting in the front seat watching the show and everybody speaking, although they were speaking in German, but still I was following that. Kurt Diemberger passed by me many times. He did not even wish me. He did not even say hello to me. That was the first time I saw him. On the following day, the Television Corporation of Austria, some organization, took us all on the mountain, on a particular mountain in Salzburg, and that's where we were interviewed. And there, first time, Kurt had to speak to me, and that too in a way he was forced to by Markus, who wanted to speak to me and he wanted Kurt to translate it in English. So that is how Kurt spoke to me and I answered. And that is about all. There was no wishing, there was no saying hello to each other, and we, even after that, when we went back on our own.
Kurt Diemberger has written in English, for example, a lot about the Broad Peak, a number of articles about the Broad Peak expedition, and he's written books in German also. In the course of his writing these books, did he ever contact you to ask you for information or to check facts or dates or get your perspective on anything? Has he ever spoken to you during the research for his books?
No. As I told you, first time I saw him was in 1997, but he has never spoken to me, never talked to me on anything relating to Broad Peak or anything for that matter.
Even by letter?
No. Neither letter, nor phone, nor email, nothing of the sort.
Did you speak with Richard Sale when he was writing his book?
Yes, I did. And that was not on my own. The first time I came to know who Richard Sale was, when he called me. He had gone and apparently picked up my telephone number from Markus Schmuck or Fritz Wintersteller, and then he rang me up from England, and he told me who he was and what he was doing, and I was very happy, and I told him, I hope you will be able to bring out the truth and tell all the details. And remember, during my conversation, I also told him, remember that whatever you write in this book should be aimed at seeing that all these 4 climbers went on Broad Peak successfully, and they achieved it. That is the point that has to be brought out. And so far as other differences are concerned, do bring them up, but don't give them too much importance. And then, of course, he asked me many questions, and that was not the only call. I had several calls from him. And I called him. I got his telephone number, and we exchanged conversation many, many times. And in all those conversations, we were discussing many things relating to the diaries which were with him. He in fact wanted to know if I had a diary. It's so unfortunate that I had my diaries, but they were all gone, in the sense that, I had made so many movements in the armed forces that they were not traceable, they were not available, and therefore I could not give him any information from the diaries, but based on what little I remember, I gave him a lot of information.
So, have you ever read any of Kurt Diemberger's books about Broad Peak?
No.
Have you read Richard's book?
Yes, I have. Richard's book I have read at great length, and in fact, after having read it, he sent me a copy. Richard Sale sent me a copy, and the moment I went through it, it took me about a week to go through it thoroughly, and then I called him back and I congratulated him, and I told him that, thank you, Richard, I think you've done a great job, because particularly, I had a soft corner for Markus Schmuck, and I thought that he was under a lot of stress and strain, and I thought that this book will do a lot of good to him.
Why are you talking to me? Why are you helping tell this story?
Why am I?
Yeah, I'm just curious, why are you've come and let me interview you, and I'm just curious, why do you care?
The reason is that you asked for it, and perhaps you were approached by somebody, I don't know.
No?
No. So you wanted to take this interview yourself, is it?
I've talked with Christian and Reinhold Schmuck, and also with Fritz Wintersteller Jr., his son.
Yes, his son, yes.
And they also asked if I would talk to you, and if I did talk to you, if I would make a videotape. And so it's always, people always wonder about other people's motives for doing things. So and so I just want to see, how do you seem concerned about
Yes.
this expedition because you care about the people.
Of course. I care about the people, I care about this expedition, and I care about everything that has been written in favor and against.
Yes.
Now, a few things which Kurt Diemberger has written about me, and that too now in 2005, I'm beginning to wonder as to what is this going on. The peak was captured in 1957. We were together in 1957. He never corresponded me. He never talked to me. Even in 1997 when I went to Salzburg, he didn't even have the courtesy of coming and inviting me for a meal or for a cup of tea or something, or talking to me and saying hello to me. And finally, then Fritz, Wintersteller's son, sends me an email and tells me that this is what Kurt Diemberger has written about you, and what have you got to say? So on that I turned around and I sent him an email and I said, it's you youngsters, you and Markus Schmuck's son, Reinhold, you two should get together and do something about it. What are you asking me? I have told you many times that what he is telling is incorrect, and I told him on telephone as well. Then he suggested that I should make a video cover of all that happened and I should send it to him. So on that I said, I referred your name and I said the best person would be Bill, and if you know him, get in touch with him and tell him to do something in that direction. Yeah. As far as I am concerned, I can only tell you in writing what went wrong and what was right. And as far as Kurt Diemberger is concerned, whatever he has written referring to me is nothing but a bundle of lies.
Now, the main thing that I think motivates me, and I think from what you said too, is to not forget in all of this, the four of them, including Diemberger, including Buhl, they did something amazing in 1957.
Yes, of course.
And the sad thing is that even though there were problems on the mountain, that's very common actually.
Yeah.
That normally would never have still been an issue. And it's what happened on Chogalisa that I think has overshadowed all the wonderful things that they really did accomplish.
Yeah. You know, Bill, I have always said it, and this is just my analysis. I may be wrong in my judgment. Let's assume that Kurt Diemberger at that age, when he was what, 25 years old I suppose, and Hermann Buhl having captured Nanga Parbat, if these two had come to scale Broad Peak all by themselves, let me tell you, my analysis tells me that they would not have been successful. The reason for that was that what Markus Schmuck and Fritz Wintersteller did right from the beginning, the way Fritz Wintersteller used to lead the porters, he used to be in front, and then even when we got to the base camp, beyond the base camp, when they went to Camp 1, Camp 2, it was Fritz who used to make the trek.
Yes.
I want to know how many times did Kurt Diemberger, or for that matter Hermann Buhl, made the trek.
Yeah, sometimes on the mountain Hermann Buhl did, but actually Hermann Buhl writes in his report complimenting Fritz Wintersteller on how often he was breaking trail, and also his, he says something like, I was amazed at how safely and quickly Fritz crosses the ice and then onto the rock. Even Hermann Buhl, who was a master climber, writes that he was amazed at Fritz Wintersteller's.
And you know, this reminds me of many occasions when Hermann Buhl used to come to Fritz Wintersteller and start yelling and shouting in the German. And I used to ask Fritz later on what happened. And I discovered that he was trying to throw weight around and tell Fritz Wintersteller that he is the leader. But Fritz Wintersteller, of course, would tell him, you may be the leader, you may be anything, I know my job and I'm doing it. And that's about all he used to say. He did not try to offend anyone. And let me tell you, Fritz, Wintersteller and Markus Schmuck were made of a different metal. And as I said before, if these two were not there, the other two would not have gone successfully on top of Broad Peak.
Yeah.
This is my analysis. And I tell you, I'm not wrong in my judgment.
Yeah. So, do you have any final comments? I'm finished my questions, but just in case there's anything else you want to say.
I thought that I would be asked a question in that direction, and that was, what was your reaction and what happened when Kurt Diemberger came back from Chocodiza all by himself to give us the news that Hermann Buhl is gone? As you know...
Tell me, please.
As you know, I had made it crystal clear to these two gentlemen when they went telling us that they're going to take photographs. Kurt Diemberger said he's going... He did not tell me.
Yeah.
Hermann Buhl came and told me that Kurt has gone to take photographs and I'm going to join him. And my statement to him was, Hermann, please go and bring him back before sunset today.
Okay, you correct me because I should have asked this question.
Yeah.
You knew that Hermann Buhl was going to go after Diemberger.
Yes, I knew.
Kurt and Fritz and Markus did not.
They only got a letter from him.
Yeah, they got a letter. But your permission to Hermann Buhl was only to go and get Diemberger and bring him back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me tell you what happened. I was fast asleep early in the morning. Hermann Buhl comes, knocks, and probably he threw something and made some noise, and I got up and he came inside because it was very cold out there, and he said that I'm going to join Kurt. I said, going to join Kurt? Kurt has gone away without taking my permission, without even saying goodbye to me. So what are you going now for? He said, you know, he's alone. In his broken English,
yes.
Very limited English. And then he presented me with a couple of films for my camera, which I didn't need because it was all over and all I needed was a couple of shots for which I thought my camera was already loaded. After that, I told Hermann Buhl, I said, Hermann, the weather forecast is very bad. You know, we used to get a daily forecast from the government of Pakistan, meteorological department. And I was required to listen to the radio and then tell all these people for the reason that it used to be in English. And I said, the weather forecast for the next 4 or 5 days is bad to worse. And my request to you is that wherever Kurt Diemberger has gone, photographs, you can't take any photographs in this weather. So what are you aiming at? This is 1957. You don't have such sophisticated, you know, at that time I didn't use these words, but now I can. But I said, please go and bring Kurt Diemberger back before sunset. Because this was early in the morning. And I said, before sunset, both of you should be back. They did not do it.
Yeah.
And as I told you, Kurt Diemberger, when he came back alone, from a distance, at that time the mail runners were with us. Both the mail runners came and said, one Saab is coming, one Saab is coming. So I said, oh my God, what has happened? Meanwhile, this gentleman, Kurt Diemberger, arrived with the eyes, rubbing his eyes, and he was snow blinded. And he went to Markus and told him something. So obviously, I was curious because I didn't see Hermann. So I went behind him. And I said, Markus, what is he saying? So Markus told me, Hermann Buhl is gone. He's dead. I said, oh my God. And then I looked towards him because all the time I had attributed all this act to Kurt Diemberger because he had gone away without taking my permission and Hermann had gone to bring him back. So I just looked into one of his eyes, which one I don't know, which was functional at that time. The other eye was totally snow blinded and he couldn't see. I said, "You bloody rascal." I became hysterical after that. But obviously, life had been lost. And I was very upset on that because I didn't want this to happen when I was the liaison officer. And then I became hysterical and I went back to my tent.
Yeah.
That's what happened at the last time, you know. And I have been very upset on that on many occasions, but there is nothing I could do about it.
Thank you.